All right, so have you ever heard that Lenin himself, Lenin wouldn't even touch demons.
Ah,
Yeah, it's one of those Dostoevsky novels that everyone's heard of.
right.
It's dense, it's complicated. But today, we're going for those aha moments. We're going to unearth, I think, what makes this book still relevant even centuries after Dostoevsky wrote it,
Yeah.
and maybe even see how he kind of predicted some things about the Russian Revolution.
It's all about context.
Yeah.
Dostoevsky wasn't just, making things up in a void. This was a Russia in the middle of a huge transformation.
Okay.
Like one thing that really shook things up was the emancipation of the serfs.
Emancipation of the Serfs, 1861, big deal. But how does that connect to demons?
Well, imagine, right, millions of people, suddenly they're free, but like, where do they fit in? What are they supposed to do? That uncertainty, that clash between the old and the new, that's everywhere in the novel. It's like Dostoevsky took all those anxieties of a whole nation and crammed them into this small town.
So even though it seems like this quiet little town, Demons is actually showing us Russia itself, like a microcosm, wrestling with these huge changes.
Exactly. And that instability, well, it's the perfect breeding ground for what Dostoevsky calls demons.
Mm.
These dangerous ideas, these impulses, they start to bubble up.
Okay, so let's talk about these demons. Who are the main players in this drama, and what kind of demons are we talking about here?
Okay, well, first you got Stepan Verkovensky, this older intellectual, represents a generation that's kind of holding on to the past, a bit lost.
Kind of like Dostoevsky himself, maybe, dealing with all this rapid change going on.
Maybe, yeah. Then there's his son, Pyotr Verkovensky. Now he's the fiery revolutionary, the embodiment of all the allure and danger of, well, radical ideology.
Mm.
Thinks he has all the answers, but, no real plan to actually get there.
All about tearing down the old, but what's he building in its place? Seems like that's what Dostoevsky's getting at.
Right. And then you've got Nikolai Stavrogin, charismatic guy, but troubled.
Yeah.
Aristocrat. He's our hedonism poster boy, always chasing pleasure, but never really finding satisfaction.
He's that emptiness, right? That emptiness Dostoevsky saw in a world obsessed with stuff, with material things.
You got it.
Okay, so 3 very different characters, each kind of embodying a different side of this demon problem. And it's not just like specific ideologies like nihilism, but more like this human tendency to go to extremes, whether it's radical utopian dreams or just chasing fleeting pleasure.
Right. And Dostoevsky takes this idea of nihilism, this belief that life's meaningless, and he shows us how that can fuel some really destructive actions.
Okay.
Like Pyotr Verkovensky, he rejects all the old values, the beliefs, but instead of facing that void, he tries to fill it with this big, grandiose vision, but it's ultimately empty.
And it's that emptiness that makes him dangerous, right? Desperate for meaning, even if it means violence and manipulating people.
Exactly. And this is where it gets really interesting, you see. Dostoevsky doesn't just talk about nihilism as some abstract idea. He shows how it takes root in real people and how terrifying that can be.
Okay, so we've got the intellectual demon of nihilism with Pyotr, the hedonism demon with Nikolai. But how does it all play out? What happens in the story?
Well, picture this. Peaceful town, but all these tensions simmering beneath the surface. Then Pyotr shows up, like throwing a match into a powder keg, starts manipulating people, whispering these revolutionary ideas, having secret meetings.
Creating chaos, using those anxieties that are already there, like a virus spreading his own brand of demonism through the town.
Wow, yeah, that's a powerful image.
Mm-hmm.
And don't forget, Dostoevsky's writing just a few decades after all these revolutions are sweeping across Europe, so that fear of upheaval, the specter of violence, that was very real.
So it's not just these abstract ideas floating around. It's about the real potential for demons to erupt, to cause chaos, to lead to destruction. But how does he portray that descent into chaos? Is it dramatic, operatic, or something more subtle?
He blends drama and satire in this really interesting way. Like there's this grand gala hosted by Julia, the governor's wife, opulent setting, champagne flowing, but under the surface, all this tension.
Oh, I see.
Pyotr uses this event to pour his agenda, creates this spectacle that's both farcical and terrifying.
A farcical revolution. That's interesting. So is he saying these big ideas can devolve into absurdity?
I think he's definitely critiquing the self-importance, the theatricality of these revolutionaries.
Okay.
But at the same time, there's this real sense of danger lurking beneath the surface. Remember, this is a world where gossip, rumors, they can have devastating consequences.
Okay, so we have this mix of ideas, personalities, events, all colliding in this small town. But how does Dostoevsky use this microcosm to comment on Russia as a whole?
He's showing us how easily a society can be seduced by these radical solutions,
Hmm.
especially when everything feels uncertain and everything's changing.
Right.
He's warning us about extremes, blind faith and ideology on one hand, chasing empty pleasures on the other.
So it's not just critiquing revolution, but any ideology, any way of life that offers easy answers but ultimately leads to emptiness and despair.
Yeah.
It's like he's asking us, what happens when we lose sight of those deeper values? Compassion, community, finding meaning beyond just the material world.
That's exactly it. And maybe even more importantly, he's asking us to look at our own demons. Those seductive ideas, impulses maybe we're holding on to, even though they might be leading us down a dangerous path.
Powerful question, and it's one I think we'll keep exploring as we dive deeper into this world of demons. We'll unpack Dostoevsky's critique of revolution, the tragic consequences when passions run unchecked, and the lessons he offers for navigating the complexities of our own time.
Yeah. We were talking about those demons, right?
Yeah.
The ones sort of haunting the characters.
Yeah.
Nihilism, hedonism. But Dostoevsky doesn't just leave them as these abstract ideas. He really brings them to life through the characters.
All right, like Nikolai Stavrogin, he's the poster boy for that downward spiral into hedonism.
Mm-hmm.
Always looking for pleasure, but never really finding satisfaction. But it's more than just, indulging in excess. Dostoevsky's trying to show us this deeper emptiness there.
Exactly. Think about that scene, where Stavrogin confesses to this horrible crime, the abuse of a young girl.
Right.
It's chilling, but it also reveals something really profound about him. He's not just evil. He's lost, adrift. This world where traditional morals have basically crumbled, and he's trying to fill that void with these fleeting, destructive experiences.
It's like he's trying to shock himself into feeling something, anything, because the alternative is just this abyss of meaninglessness.
Yeah, that's a great point. It really speaks to the anxieties of that time, right? Loss of faith, those traditional values eroding, that fear that without those anchors, we're all just lost at sea.
And that's where Dostoevsky's critique of revolution comes in. Because in a way, revolution's also an attempt to fill that void, right?
Absolutely.
To create a new world, a new meaning system.
Dostoevsky was deeply suspicious of those utopian ideologies, especially the ones that wanted to wipe out the old world for some supposedly perfect future.
Yeah.
He saw them as dangerous, leading to violence, to tyranny.
And we see that play out in Demons with Pyotr and his little revolutionary group. They're so fixated on their ideology, they justify anything to achieve their goals.
Yeah, and one of the scariest things about Pyotr is that he doesn't even seem to believe in the ideology he's pushing.
Oh, interesting.
It's just a tool, a way to manipulate people to get power and cause chaos.
Which makes him even more dangerous. He's not driven by conviction, but by this nihilistic urge to destroy just for the sake of destroying.
Exactly. And Dostoevsky seems to be saying this kind of nihilism can poison even the most well-meaning movements.
So, if nihilism and hedonism are the problems, what's the alternative? I know Dostoevsky was a devout Christian, but he's not exactly preaching fire and brimstone and demons.
No, not exactly. But you see these glimpses of another path, finding meaning, purpose that doesn't depend on radical ideologies or chasing pleasure. Take Ivan Shatov.
Right, Shatov, the ex-revolutionary who's now embracing those traditional Russian values, Orthodox faith, like a return to his roots, finding meaning in those deeper, more enduring parts of human experience.
Exactly. Remember that scene where he's passionately defending his belief in the Russian people, their destiny?
Yeah.
He's not calling for blind nationalism. It's more like this spiritual awakening, recognizing the sacredness of life, of community.
And what about Kirillov? He's kind of a spiritual alternative to nihilism too, right? But in a very different way.
Yeah, Kirillov's fascinating. He embodies this sort of twisted mysticism, believes that by killing himself, he can become like Christ, usher in this new era of freedom.
So it's suicide as a revolutionary act, but also a spiritual one. It's a lot to process.
That's Dostoevsky for you, always pushing those boundaries.
Right.
It's important to understand the context here. Kirillov's struggling with this idea of Christian socialism, a movement that was gaining popularity in Russia.
Christian socialism. Okay, break that down for me. What is that?
Essentially trying to combine the teachings of Christianity with socialist ideals, emphasizing social justice, compassion for the poor, belief that real freedom comes through collective action.
So a kind of spiritualized socialism, rooted in love and sacrifice, not revolution and violence.
Exactly. Kirillov takes it to the extreme, though. Believes his self-sacrifice can redeem humanity, pave the way for this utopian future.
But it's a flawed vision, right? Tragic even. Still relies on this idea of one grand act instead of focusing on those everyday acts of compassion and love.
Right. It speaks to Dostoevsky's bigger critique of utopianism, whether it's secular or religious. He seems to be saying that real meaning, real redemption, that's found in the messy, imperfect reality of human relationships, everyday life.
So it's not about some grand solution to the demon problem. It's about facing those demons within us, finding a way to live with them, find meaning and purpose despite them.
Precisely. And that's what makes demons so powerful, so relevant even today. It forces us to confront the darkness in ourselves, the pull of those extreme ideologies, the search for meaning in a world that often feels meaningless.
Like he's holding up this mirror to humanity saying, look, these are the challenges, the choices. What are you going to do?
And those choices have consequences, not just for us, but for everyone around us. That's a lesson that may be even more important now than ever. So we've been talking about all these demons in the novel, like the ideas, the characters.
Right.
But there's this real-world demon looming in the background,
Yeah.
the Russian Revolution. Did Dostoevsky actually, foresee this huge event writing decades earlier?
Yeah, I mean, it's a question that's fascinated people for ages. And obviously, we can't say he had a crystal ball or anything, but there are these uncanny parallels between demons and what happened in Russia a few decades later.
Yeah.
Give me an example. What are some of the things in the book that make it feel so prophetic?
One thing that really stands out is how he portrays the revolutionaries, their psychology. He gets that fervor, the idealism, but also the ruthlessness, that willingness to use violence, deception to reach their goals.
And you see that mirrored in the real-life revolutionaries like Lenin, Trotsky, who are ready to sacrifice so many lives for their ideology.
Absolutely. And Dostoevsky also seems to anticipate the role of propaganda, misinformation in these movements. Think about Pyotr Verkovensky spreading rumors, creating scandals to destabilize the town, to create chaos.
Like he's building this atmosphere of fear and suspicion, making people more open to those radical ideas. It's a tactic that's been used over and over again by authoritarian regimes.
Exactly. And Dostoevsky's insights into how crowds work, the dynamics of social unrest, they feel, eerily relevant even today.
So it's not just about predicting specific events. It's more like he understood the underlying forces that drive this kind of upheaval.
Yeah, he was grappling with these really fundamental questions about human nature, the desire for power, the dangers of unchecked ideology. These are themes that go beyond any one historical moment.
Which is why Demons still resonate so strongly, even though it was written, over 150 years ago. It's a warning, reminding us how fragile social order can be, how easily things can slip into chaos and violence.
And it forces us to look inward, to confront those demons in ourselves. What are those seductive ideologies, those dark impulses we might be carrying around, even if we don't realize it?
It's a question that feels especially urgent now, right? With all the political division, those echo chambers on social media, the rise of extremism.
Dostoevsky reminds us that the fight against tyranny, against oppression, it's not just happening out there on the streets or in government. It's happening inside us, too.
So what can we do? How do we resist those demons and try to build a world that's more just, more compassionate?
Dostoevsky doesn't give us easy answers, but he seems to suggest it's about embracing those core human values, love, compassion, forgiveness, being willing to actually talk to people who see things differently.
Recognizing that we're all human, even when we disagree, when there's conflict.
Exactly. And it's about nurturing those qualities in ourselves, too. Humility, empathy, really trying to understand the truth.
Dostoevsky's work really drives home this point, The fight for a better world, it's not just about changing laws or systems, it's about changing ourselves.
And maybe that's the most important thing Demons leaves us with. It's a call to action, a challenge to confront those demons inside and out, to work towards a world where compassion and understanding actually win out over hatred and division.
And on that note, this has been our deep dive into Dostoevsky's Demons. But the conversation doesn't have to end here. Keep exploring this book. Wrestle with its ideas. See what it has to say to you about being human, about the world we live in. Until next time.